Hi, everybody. This is our final project investigating the effects of lifestyle choices on heart rate recovery. Our research investigates the relationship between lifestyle factors and cardiovascular recovery efficiency, focusing on how sleep duration and caffeine consumption affect heart rate recovery after exercise. The study examines three healthy 21-year-old males, which happens to be us, performing 1 mile runs at a 7-minute pace under varying conditions, after different sleep durations and caffeine intake levels. Heart rate data was collected using a Vernier Go wireless monitor throughout the recovery period. Heart rate recovery, or HRR, represents the decrease in heart rate immediately following physical activity and serves as a crucial indicator of cardiovascular health. With cardiovascular disease maintaining its position as the leading cause of death globally, understanding HRR provides valuable insights into both athletic performance and overall health outcomes. Standard measurements show a typical decrease of 15 to 20 beats in the first minute and 20 to 30 beats after 2 minutes. Previous research demonstrates that poor sleep quality significantly impairs recovery rates, with marked differences between well-rested and sleep-deprived individuals. Additionally, caffeine intake can influence recovery patterns through elevated post-exercise heart rates, particularly at higher doses. The mathematical framework for this research utilizes an exponential decay function to model heart rate recovery. This base model incorporates resting heart rate, peak exercise heart rate, and a recovery constant that determines the rate of return to baseline. To account for lifestyle variables, the recovery constant is calculated as a product of the baseline recovery constant and two-factor coefficients representing sleep and caffeine intake. The baseline recovery constant, typically ranging from 0.3 to 0.5 minutes for regular exercisers, represents an individual's inherent recovery rate under optimal conditions. The sleep factor coefficient quantifies how different levels of rest affect recovery, ranging from optimal recovery with full rest to significantly impaired recovery under sleep deprivation. Similarly, the caffeine factor adjusts for how caffeine consumption impacts the recovery process, with higher consumption leading to slower recovery rates. This systematic approach enables quantitative evaluation of how these common daily choices influence cardiovascular recovery efficiency.
With the introduction and background in mind, I'll walk you through the procedures for our experiment explaining how sleep duration and caffeine consumption affect HRR. This process was designed to be both reliable and straightforward to yield nice results. The research question of how sleep and caffeine impact HRR guided our setup. Since monitoring sleep and heart rate can be challenging, we selected equipment to ensure accuracy. We used the Vernier Go wireless heart rate monitor with a LabQuest Mini to measure heart rates. This device employs photoplasmography, or PPG, to detect blood volume changes and convert them into beats per minute. The data is transmitted via Bluetooth to LogaPro software, making the system portable enough to bring to the track. To measure sleep, our three participants wore either an Apple Watch or a Whoop band. The Apple Watch uses an accelerometer and heart rate sensor, while the Whoop band records heart rate variability, respiratory rate, and motion. Both devices combine the data to provide us with sleep insights seen on their app. For caffeine, participants consumed Celsius energy drinks, which made dosing straightforward. They drank either half a can for 100 milligrams of caffeine or a full can for 200 milligrams. Through this experiment, we learned that consistency is key. Depending on the variable being tested, participants either recorded their sleep or consumed a specific dose of caffeine. For caffeine, they drank 0 milligrams, 100 milligrams, or 200 milligrams within 2 hours, but no less than 30 minutes before the run. This ensured caffeine's peak effect during exercise. Before every caffeinated run, the participant had 8 hours of sleep to avoid bias in the data. For sleep, participants aimed for 6, 8, or 10 hours the night before. Although exact hours of sleep can't always be controlled, wearable devices recorded sleep duration to allow for meaningful analysis. Next, participants completed a 1-mile run at a consistent pace of 7 minutes per mile, tracked by an Apple Watch. This pace elevated heart rate sufficiently while maintaining consistency across trials. After finishing their run, a researcher attached a heart rate monitor to each participant and recorded HRR data for 400 seconds, or roughly 6 minutes. This time frame provided sufficient data for variability calculations. Finally, we employed two one-way ANOVA tests to evaluate the effects of sleep and caffeine on HRR. The two following hypotheses were tested. Number one, Does sleep significantly affect HRR? Or number two, does caffeine significantly affect HRR? Each variable had multiple levels as explained before. Sleep was 6, 8, and 10 hours, and caffeine was 0, 100, and 200 milligram doses. By analyzing these together, we gained insights into individual effects through our experiments. This structured process ensured that our results were both reliable and insightful.
Using the theoretical model and experimental data, our initial findings look like there may be some correlation between heart rate recovery and sleep duration or caffeine intake. The theoretical model was graphed against the experimental data for each trial, producing 18 individual graphs. Upon initial inspection, it appears that a higher sleep duration produces a higher heart rate recovery, and a higher caffeine intake produces a lower heart rate recovery. These graphs allow us to visualize the data and make preliminary conclusions regarding the experiment. While these graphs were nice for initial conclusions and analysis, ANOVA testing had to be conducted in order to make concrete conclusions regarding the correlation between heart rate recovery and sleep duration or caffeine intake. Statistical analysis through ANOVA testing revealed interesting patterns in our results. For sleep duration, we observed mean recovery values of 35.8, 36.8, and 36.7 beats per minute for 6, 8, and 10 hours of sleep, respectively. While these values seem to suggest a trend towards improved recovery with increased sleep, the calculated p-value of 0.94 is much larger than the significance level of 0.05. This means we fail to reject the null hypothesis and cannot conclude that sleep duration has a significant impact on heart rate recovery. However, the data we collected implies that there may be some significance to how sleep affects your heart rate recovery. So further testing with a larger sample size and more precise measurement devices may produce a different result. The caffeine trial showed a clear trend in the data, with mean recovery values decreasing from 31.6 beats per minute with no caffeine to 29.3 beats per minute at 200 milligrams of caffeine. This indicates that high levels of caffeine intake seem to affect heart rate recovery in a negative manner. After performing an ANOVA test, we calculated a p-value of 0.8, which is also much larger than the significance level of 0.05. We failed to reject the null hypothesis, so we cannot conclude that caffeine has an effect on heart rate recovery. With that being said, further testing with a larger sample size and more precise measurement devices may produce a different result.
Our investigation into the effects of sleep duration and caffeine intake on heart rate recovery yielded interesting but statistically inconclusive results. Despite observing trends suggesting that increased caffeine and decreased sleep might impair recovery, high p-values prevented us from rejecting the null hypothesis. Also, several limitations impacted our study, including a small sample size of only 3 participants, potential inaccuracies in our heart rate monitoring equipment, and uncontrolled variables such as stress levels and hydration status. Future research would definitely benefit from a larger participant pool and more precise measurement tools. Nevertheless, this study establishes a foundation for understanding lifestyle factors' influence on cardiovascular recovery and provides a mathematical framework for future investigations in this field.